So this is a bit of a step-by-step guide into how you can go about getting all of this sorted. And I'm going to give you the steps and then sort of break it down as we move along. So firstly, when you are creating processes, it is very important that the key process holders be involved. So if you're a more established business, that could be your senior team. If you're just starting out, it could be your founding team. If you're a solopreneur, chances are it's just you. But I would highly recommend that you go through this process with somebody else, purely because it just gives you an objective opinion and another set of eyes, which is always very, very useful. The reason why it's important to make this very inclusive and not just, okay, well, Nicci, you're the operations person, so you do it. People buy into things that they have created. So if you and I have walked this journey of building this system, chances are I'm going to take greater ownership of it rather than it just becomes something that you impose on me. So besides the fact that you need different brains in the room, you actually really want people to buy into these, because that's the most effective way to get them done and to get people to adhere to them. So what you need to do is gather all of these ideas beforehand. And there is a Jamboard template. For those of you who aren't familiar with Jamboard, it's a Google app. And it's basically a whiteboard sticky note app where you can collaborate. So you can create pages and people can go and put all of their notes on it. So you can do this as a spreadsheet, you can, however you decide to do this. You need to get people thinking about this beforehand. And the reason why it's important to give a week or maybe even 2 weeks before is because there might be things that I don't think of in the moment. You know, when people say to you, who are your clients? And all of a sudden, like, you can't think of a single client, you just go completely blank. This is what will happen. So you need to give people time to give it some thought, and then, oh, there's this thing that I do. Maybe I need to put that down. Then when you're in the actual workshop itself, you discuss these further, you build on them, you add to them. And at this point, it's really important that you understand that too much information is a good thing. The more information you have, the better. It doesn't matter if it's repetitive, if they're duplicates, if they're things that aren't really important. You need to focus on really getting everything down. That's the most important thing. And then you go through this sort of pruning process. So you can see why you need to start bigger and prune down, because if you start small and prune down, you're going to end up with a very small set of options. So you remove things, you combine them. This is a duplicate, this isn't important. You really get to the crux of what the business stands for. You put all of these things into categories that make sense for your business, and then you look at the action plan. So let's have a quick look at how we go about identifying our core processes. So there are 4 key questions that you need to ask. How are we acquiring business? How are we delivering on our promise? How are we collecting money? And how are we retaining clients? Because these really break things down into what needs to be done by you as a business. There are a lot of companies that offer lead generation, that might offer social media, all of those kind of things. If you go through this and you suddenly realize that actually lead generation is a fundamental process to us, we have to do it internally, you might make very different decisions around that, or outsourcing things like social media. So really understand how these things work. So this is basically, I mean, this is like a replica of the Jamboard that I made. So if we look at how we are acquiring business, dump everything on here. So you can see there are a couple of repetitions here: educational videos and content, social media advertising, every single thing you do that would bring in business. Maybe it is working with an outsourced lead gen company, email marketing, your advertising, your branding, speaking at public events. Every single thing needs to go on this. And then you go through this for each of these. So how are we delivering on our promise? When I share the Jamboard link with you, you'll actually see I've got a section that says, what is our promise? And getting back to what I said earlier, you need to understand what you are promising your clients. Because if you suddenly sit there and think, well, hang on a minute, what is my promise? You need to take a step back And it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you share with the world. It can be an internal phrase or line or whatever that you use. But what is your promise to your clients? So if you're me, my promise is business growth through operational excellence. So how do I deliver on that? So I have a kickoff briefing session with my clients. I do a team and client intro. I do a needs analysis. We sign a contract. So the reason why I've got sourcing raw materials on here is because I was using this as an example for a company that was making candles as well. So if you're in a manufacturing business, you would have a raw material process. They made candles that were organic, so they had to have supplier vetting. Service businesses have project scoping. So it's really putting all of these things down that relate to how you deliver on your promise to your clients. And sourcing raw materials, for argument's sake, that could be, in and of itself, could be a massive process. But the better it's documented, the easier it is to maintain and the easier it is to keep those standards going. So then you work through all of these sections. How are you collecting money? In my case, I work with a very small number of clients. So I don't really do a lot of invoicing. I mean, if I do 10 invoices in a month, that's quite a lot for me. But if you're in retail or manufacturing, or maybe you've got sort of an app, digital business where people are downloading a lot, how you're collecting money can be really important. So are you using a system like Stripe or PayPal, or, is it digitized? What does it look like? If you retail, where you kind of processing, or you want to be processing in excess of 50 orders a day, this section will be a lot busier. So understand, how are we collecting all of this money and what's involved in it? Are we using a Zapper, SnapScan, Yoko machine? Where's all the money going? How does this whole thing work? And then finally, how are you retaining business or clients? How are you making sure that people come back? Because as much as, if we get back to the example of growing your business by 50%, it is more expensive to acquire clients than it is to keep clients. And if you make a strategic decision to part ways with a client, that's a separate conversation. But I want my clients to constantly be coming back. If I'm working with them on a project basis, when that project comes to an end, how do I make sure that we keep going? Maybe I can write a report with them for that recommends further actions. I can share new information with them. I can upsell new products. I can keep that relationship going. Maybe they only come back 3 or 4 months down the line, but I want to make sure they keep coming back. And it's actually something that you need to consider when you are creating these processes, because often once we get the money, cool, that's it, we're done. We've closed out the project. We now need to move on. And this is a really important element around business retention. So how can I make sure, even if it's in retail, if it's in a digital business where you're working with an app, how do I make sure people keep buying from me? Because ideally, that's what I want. I want them to stay with me. So then we go and we sort all of these processes, as I said, into categories. And I've just done this with the example of acquiring business. So you can see I joined the Facebook and LinkedIn advertising, social media. You can delete one, whatever works. Okay, sorry, oops, I left those 2 duplicates there, but you would delete one of them. So if I divide my business acquisition actions into 2 categories, for me, it would be inbound activities and outbound activities. So how am I attracting people to my business, and how am I actively selling? And how you categorize these is entirely up to you. So if you look at the delivering on your promise, you could have a whole category, if you're in manufacturing, that looks at your raw material sourcing processes or your client vetting process. So for me, I created like a client onboarding process or category, and then like a client/project management category. So that was how I divided those 2. For collecting money, for me, it was pretty simple and straightforward because, as I said, there are a lot, my systems are quite simple around that. But that also made me realize, so if I just go back to the collecting money, because of the nature of my business, I don't need a full-time bookkeeper or accountant. That is a process that I can outsource without compromising my clients. So this will also help you understand, hang on, these are not core. Okay, so now we build an action plan. We go through the analysis, what is documented and what isn't documented. If nothing's documented, that's okay. You've started this, and that's the most important thing. And then these next sort of 3 points, you need to look at them holistically. So what are the biggest pain points? Where's your biggest headache? What will have the biggest impact? And what can be done quickly? And the reason why we need to sort of look at these together is because if you look at speed, for instance, so yes, there might be things that I look at and I go, okay, well, I can do that very quickly. If I have 20 things that I can do very quickly, all of a sudden it's not very quick. And suddenly it's going to be taking up a lot of time. So take into account, what are your biggest pain points? What is the biggest impact? Because maybe there would be one. So for me, for instance, my client onboarding process has the biggest impact on everything else, because that's where we set the expectations, that's where we sort out the contracts, that's where we agree on payment terms. It's all of those kind of things, and it has a knock-on effect on everything else. So that for me was a really important thing to get right. And it was also becoming my biggest headache because largely, and I'm sure a lot of you in the service industry have experienced this, a lot of the time we don't deliver on our promises because of misaligned expectations. So that can have a knock-on effect, but it's really important that you look at this kind of overall. So from a speed perspective, I could sort out my quoting my invoicing process very quickly, very easily. That was a 5-minute job. So I got that done, checked it off the list and moved on.